lobby. Let's all go to the lobby, lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Hello, horror hounds, and welcome to Now Slaying, an It Slays podcast production where we break down the latest and greatest in the world of horror. I'm your not-so-humble host, Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And today on the show, we're going to be discussing Bring Her Back, which was released May 30th, 2025, exclusively in theaters. Now, Rowan, Danny and Michael Philippou, or Raka Raka, as they were previously known, made a big splash with their feature directorial debut, Talk to Me, a couple of years back. A movie that we covered here on Now Slaying, and both gave a slay, our top score.
Oh, I'm glad you know. That's what I was frantically looking for. What did I rate it?
The slay, yeah, no, we both slayed it. So their follow-up feature, Bring Her Back, just hit theaters to a very positive critical reception, but maybe not quite as rapturous, I'd say, as Talk to Me. Have the critics stifled your excitement to the Philippou brothers' sophomore effort, or were you still looking forward to Bring Her Back?
I was looking forward. I was doing a very Colton thing where I haven't seen what the reviewers have been saying, and I've kind of stayed away from everything just because of how much I love Talk to Me. I was I really want to go in. I'm fully prepared for it. So it didn't curtail my excitement for Bring Her Back. What about you?
Yeah, like you said, I typically stay away from things that I'm very excited in. It's kind of weird to be on a horror genre podcast where I feel like there's a lot of big trailers that come out that I'm like, oh, it's an A24 thing, so I don't want to check out the trailer. I don't want to be spoiled. But yeah, obviously, Talk to Me was my favorite movie of 2023, I believe. I think maybe Past Lives was also up there, but I mean, very different movies, obviously. But yeah, I was incredibly excited for this one. I skipped all the trailers. I think that there was the first poster, which looked like some rain on a window that just said Bring Her Back, was my phone background lock screen for ages. So yeah, I've been looking forward to this one. I had no idea what it was about. I kind of had a good guess, just once again, based on the title or based on kind of what they explored in their previous movie, but I was very interested in checking it out. So are we so back? Well, before we get into that, let's check out the trailer.
It's been years since my daughter passed. I've spoken with an angel. It showed me a way to be a mother again.
Welcome to your new home. What are you going to do to me? Listen. We can bring her back.
Bring Her Back was directed by Danny and Michael Philippou and written by Danny Philippou and Bill Hinsman, and the story is as follows. A brother and sister uncover a terrifying ritual at the secluded home of their new foster mother, keeping things very vague in that description. Now here on Now Slaying, we like to keep things relatively spoiler-free up front before getting into the more in-depth spoiler-filled discussion. So Rowan, what are your spoiler-free thoughts on Bring Her Back?
This section, we like to keep it even more vague than the bio there and the synopsis.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so Bring Her Back, probably, I was kind of thinking, what is, kind of the most brutal thing I've seen in theaters recently? Viscera for, gore and just kind of, unsettling. And it's kind of funny.
Final Destination Bloodlines.
Yeah, which it seems that anyone that's written me, not impressed with you and me whatsoever.
Oh, no.
I've heard from multiple people. They're like, what? You guys gave it what? And it wasn't a slay? Everyone seems to love this movie except for you and me. So, yeah, I was trying to think, what like this? And it's kind of funny because I was, looking and I was like, it might actually be Talk to Me that, kind of gave me, this feeling in terms of kind of that unsettled, goriness, viscera of it. Obviously Talk to Me, the iconic headbanging scene that, we, I think at the time we linked to A24 and Hereditary, just banging heads off everything.
Yeah, it's kind of their thing. It pops up, I feel like, out of every 5 or 6 of their horror movies, it has to be in at least one.
And I mean, I'll just let you know, there's not necessarily headbanging, but there's banging in this, banging of walls and windows, and so definitely A24. Just still thriving. So I don't think we really need to give a check in like that.
What a weird thing to relate it back to.
Yeah. I feel like we just do this, bi-weekly update of like A24 is still making money off of everybody's trauma and grief.
Still banging.
Just still banging. But this was a little slower burn than I think I was kind of expecting going in. Especially like I said, obviously all I was really comparing it to was Talk to Me. And I was like, from what I remember, like Talk to Me, we kind of like got into it pretty quick, like what was going on with that hand and all this kind of stuff, where this like really like draws the story out. I do love the character.
Takes its time.
Yeah, it takes its time. I love the character development on like the brother and sister Andy and Piper. And I will say also, pretty good kid performances in this. I'll put that up front there. I thought Sora Wan as Piper was fantastic. I don't know. I didn't like Wikipedia. I saw Letterboxd. This is her only credit.
Oh, wow. That's great. She's definitely a standout in this movie.
Yeah. I mean, the guy who played Andy, Billy Barrett or Barrett, I don't know how he would pronounce it, but, he's been in movies that are better than this. I see Craven as the top one, so.
Oh, God.
I'm sure he got a little bit of that Sony Marvel money going on. But yeah, obviously I was most interested seeing this, not only because it's Talk to Me guys, but I think we're both pretty big fans of Sally Hawkins. And so I was kind of excited because when I think of Sally Hawkins, which I'm sure when you think of Sally Hawkins, I just think about Paddington.
Oh, she's so good in Paddington. One of the main reasons Paddington in Peru just didn't live up to the hype of the first two.
And I just, she's so fantastic in that. And, I love both 1 and 2 of Paddington. And I'm like, this is awesome. Like this horror movie with her kind of at the center. I had seen the trailer, so I had an idea what was going on. Like you said, I mean, you'd have to be a little dull not to get it from just the name of the.
I think so.
Of the title. But I thought overall the slow burn of it worked like fairly good. I will say I'm kind of like, probably until I rate this, I'm not really gonna know, because I've been tossing up like, did this have the same impact on me like Talk to Me did, where I know I'm notorious to be like, these new directors, like this is Jordan Peele-esque, but I mean, we both said like Talk to Me, we were like, this is insane, like it's just like absolutely insane how good this is for a debut. And it's sophomore slump, I guess is what they say is a real thing, so that kind of worried me a little bit, but I thought like the performances were really good. I will say I thought the story was like a little muddled. I thought there was like a lot of stuff that's not really like explained, kind of like the lore and the rules. And it's such a shame because like there's kind of scenes like literally once the movie starts that like should be building on this lore, and it's interesting and like, oh, okay, what's going on here? I was getting a little what is it? The Medium? Is that the movie we did? The Thai one?
Oh, yeah. Steven's Patreon pick, or patron pick a while ago, yeah.
Still like one of my all-time favorite episodes we did. Like,
yeah, it was great.
But like giving me those vibes, like some culty vibes going on, and some stuff with, bringing her back and this kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. But I just felt like they almost didn't. I can't believe I'm saying this because I'm always the one that's like, you give us too much, but like they didn't give us enough, because I have no idea. Like half of this movie, I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. Like, I don't know what's going on with this weird looking kid. Never explained what's going on with this kid.
Yeah, and I have the same note, and it was actually the last thing I was going to talk about. But that's fine. We'll get into it now. What I'll say is some of the specifics of what is happening in this movie are very unclear. And as you just said, it's funny for us to be like, we need things explained, because we're always, you don't need to explain everything. But this movie, I feel like it thinks it is explaining everything. Yeah. And I went to the movie with a group. I think there was 4 or 5 of us, and all of us came out basically not knowing the specifics of how the paranormal aspects in this movie kind of unfold and how they kind of empower the third act, or how, like, what happens there. And essentially, if I don't know how those things are playing out, I also don't really know what I should be in fear of for a horror movie, or like kind of tense for the characters you're following, just to basically be like watching them stumble into whatever is happening. So it was the sort of thing that, it was definitely confusing, or confusing might not be the right word for it, because there's obviously kind of broad strokes that I understand what's happening. It just wasn't really satisfying, is what I'll say in that regard. And I think it's just, once again, because I didn't really understand exactly what was happening. We'll get into more of that in obviously the spoiler-filled section. That third act as a whole, I would say, goes off the rails a little bit for what sort of movie this is. You briefly mentioned the scary kid. This is a movie that very much lingers, Ollie, just like lingers in the scary kid trope, right? It's something that, like, I remember when Hereditary was coming out, they were marketing it on the scary kid trope, and then everyone went and saw it, and we were all shocked that the scary kid died 40 minutes into the movie. Ollie, or Oliver, in this movie is omnipresent. He's in this whole thing basically throughout it, and he's doing the scary kid thing. He's staring, he's has his mouth open, he's eating a bug or two, throughout the movie. It's the sort of thing we've definitely seen before, and it was a little bit exhausting in the movie, that I feel like a lot of the earlier scares in the movie, or kind of like how the directors were setting the vibe, I guess, was with this scary kid, because once again, he does a good job. The Jonah Wren Phillips as Ollie does a fine job. It's just a lot of what happens with that character, I think, winds up kind of veering into what I'd call a little bit silly by the third act, where I don't know if I was fully on board with where all that goes. But getting back to kind of more of the positive things, or positive might be too strong a word, but it's different. You mentioned how much we loved Talk to Me. Talk to Me, in my opinion, still, I've seen it 3 or 4 times now, it's propulsive, it's energetic. It feels like these two brothers kind of making an entrance and proclaiming that they are here, and like, you cannot ignore this. Like, this, it felt singular, and it felt like so much that it was almost like they were going for broke, is what it felt like with Talk to Me. Just from the opening scene with, the 100 extras, the one are going through where, the kid gets stabbed at the end of it and stuff. It was just so singular and so unlike anything I've really seen, especially from a feature directorial debut, that I was just, in awe of it. This, I think they made an intentional choice to kind of slow it down a little bit. It's more of a somber movie. It's not really like showy. I think they're just trying to slow things down, make it a little bit more deliberate pacing, kind of have a more mature movie, for a lack of a better word. And to some of that, I think it works. I think the core relationships in the movie are very strong. Like, as you mentioned, the brother-sister relationship between Andy and Piper. I genuinely cared for the two characters, and once again, in a horror movie, cared a lot about them, cared about the fate of their characters. When certain things are revealed or certain things are hinted at, I was definitely worrying for these characters. So that relationship was very strong, in my opinion. Sally Hawkins, as you mentioned, she's great. She's great in pretty much everything I've ever seen her in, and here she is great as well. And she's doing something that I've never seen her do before, so that was fun to watch. The gore effects. You mentioned that essentially you can't really recall any gore effects in theaters that kind of elicited this sort of response from you, and I would be inclined to agree. Obviously, the substance has buckets of blood, buckets of gore, but tonally it's very different than what this is doing. This movie made me wince, for sure, on 2 or 3 separate occasions, and as we left the theater and we were kind of discussing it amongst ourselves, we all had different moments that we were like, that was tough to watch, or like, that was, unlike anything I've ever seen, or like, we were all admitting that there was parts that got us. So the Philippou brothers really know how to kind of bottle up gore or shock and put it through the movie. I don't think this movie is kind of like, as I said, go for broke as Talk to Me, where there's so much of it. There isn't a sequence in this movie that I would kind of point out as similar to like that hell sequence that's really quick in Talk to Me that I remember being like weirdly horrifying, or the scene in Talk to Me where the possession actually takes place and the brother flies across the room and stuff. But there's like these little moments, these sequences that are very effective and very horrifying, especially just like on a gory level. What else? What else to say about it? I think we kind of just danced around everything else that I kind of said, other than maybe I really like the shallow depth of field that was used for a lot of the movie, which seems like a strange thing to point out. I know, like, there's been some directors like Zack Snyder. He loves the shallow depth of field, where essentially, I don't know, you'll get like half the character's face in focus. But this movie it's kind of motivated by a certain regard because of one of the character's disabilities in the movie, where she has partial blindness, Piper, and that's a core part of the movie, the narrative. And I just thought it was interesting seeing the world to a certain degree through her eyes. It wasn't always consistent in that way, but it seemed like at least it was motivated somewhat. And the first time kind of that shallow depth of field is employed early in the movie is when we're kind of in a scene that's from her point of view, more or less. And it was just something that I thought was very artful. I know just from working on set that when you're working with that shallow depth of field, it's very hard to get things in focus. You have such a slender margin of error. Yeah. And when I was watching it, I thought it was technically flawless in that regard. Lots of interesting little shots, lots of interesting visual imagery and, symbolism and what it means. I don't know if I can tell you what it all means, but I certainly recognize some images and, the repetition of them.
Like you said, I mean, it does look really good. I was thinking the same thing. I thought there was a lot of interesting shots. I like a lot of the shots they did with, they when they're dealing with like different levels of the house, or like one character like on an upper level and another character on a lower level. Like, I thought it was interesting shots that you don't normally see when interactions going on in there. And honestly, like I said, I think kind of the shock and awe of this film, I just kind of, I don't know why it's been on my mind. I mean, maybe just the kind of stuff we've been watching for the podcast lately, but I was just like really reflecting on how interesting not only is this very in conversation with like we said, like all the A24 stuff. Like, to me, this versus Talk to Me, like, this really feels like them being like, hey, I'm gonna make this like A24, like this is like an A24 grief horror movie, like way more to me than Talk to Me, which is why I think I was so high on Talk to Me, because I was like, this is something like totally different that I didn't expect going into an A24 movie.
Talk to Me feels a lot more commercial than a lot of A24 movies, just because it is so entertaining to watch, and I think a lot of it is because that pacing for so much of it. This one, you are correct that largely it kind of falls more into the more typical kind of A24 flow, I would say. Once again, still pockets of excitement, still pockets of gore that are probably you don't see in too many other A24 movies. Maybe like a Midsummer or something. I don't know. There was something about the gore in this every now and then, how matter of fact it was and how it didn't shy away from it. Reminded me of Midsummer. But this one feels a little bit more prototypical A24.
Yeah, and I guess I was thinking a lot about, the connection of just that feel and A24 in general, but that especially this film, and just where I was like, oh, I can see like the conversations this is having with like going back a little to like a Speak No Evil, and then going back a little and going into like a Martyrs and like this new French extremity wave and this new French movement wave. And I was like, to me, this like, I just could like really feel the influence of that, of like this like visceral, disturbing gore, like the like very serious topics, playing it very straight. And so I mean, I guess to me, for the kind of violence it has, like maybe I'm telling people like, hey, you need to be into like some Speak No Evil type stuff to,
Yeah, there's some sick stuff in here.
Yes, we can't wait to talk about it. Sick stuff. But that was just my ramblings of a madman.
Would you recommend people go out and see it? We never talked about the theater. I don't know what your experience was like.
Theater experience. We need like a drop for it or something. There was actually quite a few people at my screening. I saw this on Thursday. I saw it at the late screening, so it was like 9:50. And usually I luck out where I'm like one of like two or just me at this. This one, I think because A24 on the banner and how good Talk to Me was, there was quite a few people in there. Wasn't a good time for the guy a couple seats down for me that the minute the movie played, decided not only was he going to go on his phone, but he was going to turn the brightness on full. So it was just like, it was like I was looking at the sun essentially, but there was a guy sitting directly behind him. Showed to this guy, he was like tatted up, punk as fuck, and he literally just like bent over into the guy's ear without this guy knowing, and then just yelled, "Turn your fucking phone off."
Oh my God. What a legend.
And I was just like, what a guy. Phone never came out again.
Poor guy was scared shitless.
But to bring it back, I would recommend this. I think it was an interesting theater experience. I can tell you there was definitely spots that people were very audible in my theater of like, oh my God, or like, like a scared or something, like a jump scare or whatever. Like, people were reacting to this. So I definitely, recommend, because I want these guys to make money. I want them to keep making movies. These are the kind of people we need to be empowering to make movies. What about yourself? How was the theater? Do you recommend it?
The theater was, I would say, about 3/4 of the way full.
Nice.
Respectful audience, which was nice. It seemed like everyone was into it. There were some audible reactions, as you said as well, or a couple of older women sitting maybe a row behind me. I could hear them kind of whispering to each other, being like, "This is sick," or, who would like this sort of stuff? Like, so they were offended a little bit by what they were seeing at certain points in the movie. So, I'm sure some of our listeners will enjoy seeing the movie for that alone. But yes, basically echoing what you think. I think the Philippou brothers, I think they got something. I don't think this movie is quite as successful as Talk to Me overall, but I think you should still go out and support this kind of new class of horror directors to watch. No, they're not on the level of like a Jordan Peele or an Ari Aster or Robert Eggers or something like that yet to me, but I'm just saying that they have something distinct to them that is alluring to me in the theaters. And there's this mix of kind of technical prowess, but also still feeling a little bit commercial and exciting and fun to watch, but also still dealing with a lot of these horror tropes that are in vogue right now, as grief and trauma and whatever else, that we discuss basically every single time we mention one of these elevated horror movies. But this isn't an elevated horror movie. This is for everybody. It just has a bit of a slower pace and kind of fits the usual mold of those sorts of movies, what I'd say. But yeah, definitely check it out. It's as I said, it's more commercial than the regular A24 fare, even though this one is packaged up a little bit more like a traditional A24 movie, but nowhere near as like cheap feeling as like a Blumhouse movie or something. These guys have something here, and I want to see what they do with their like third time out, even though I think that might just be Talk to Me too, but I don't know. We'll see. I'm interested to see what they're doing regardless. So it seems like both of us are recommending that you go out and check this one out in theaters. And with that, I think it's time to cut to the spoiler discussion for Bring Her Back. We are now in our spoiler discussion for Bring Her Back, so if you've not seen Bring Her Back, it's time to tune out and come back once you've seen the movie, or keep listening if you simply don't care. Rowan, starting things off big. I want to know how you'd feel if your mom came into your room and gave you golden showers each night when you were in bed. It's kind of funny when I was watching the movie that I was so shocked by this quick scene that, once again, in the overall scope of the movie, I'm not 100% sure what it means, other than basically setting up that there might be a developmental challenge there with the character when he's recovering from his father's passing, that basically the mom is kind of using as evidence to kind of gaslight him into that he's not well. But such a strange little scene that is, I don't know, it's brought up I think twice in the movie and then just kind of falls out.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it definitely set up as this, like I'm trying to get rid of him so he's not staying in my house, so I need to slowly, make him go crazy, which is this is just one of many things that, Sally Hawkins is just incredible in this, because, this brings me to my main fact that it was I never really could have guessed that I was going to come into a movie and hate Sally Hawkins so much as this character of Laura. And to me, that's just such a amazing testament to how good of an actor she is, because this character is just despicable. Like, this character
100%.
is so, like, vile. I mean, we're going to get into more stuff like, pouring piss on a teenager is like the least offensive thing that she does.
Kind of offensive in a somewhat realistic way, though.
Yes.
I didn't see, oftentimes you have a character like this that they're, irreprehensible. The audience is going to hate them. They're doing horrific things and kind of turning our characters against one another. But there's always this aspect of them kind of like smiling at the camera.
Yeah.
They get one over on the protagonist and they kind of smile at the camera so the audience knows they're evil. I feel like Sally Hawkins embodying Laura just believes everything she's saying to her core, and based on who our protagonist is of this movie, obviously she's the antagonist, she's evil, but it's motivated to a certain degree, which makes it a little bit more unsettling that Sally Hawkins was able to kind of slip into this character what seemed like so easily.
Yeah, and I mean, like we said, we said it in the spoiler-free section, is, to me, this is also what kind of really hurts the film, is that she's so motivated by her motivations in this film that I feel like as the audience, we just like really don't understand fully. Like, we know there is this cult at play. They're bringing people back, inhabiting bodies, like other people's bodies, It's obsessed with doing the circle everywhere, I guess, just wiping, wax on, wax off, Mr. Miyagi going on. But it's simple things like this, because, like, Laura does this on, like, Ollie's head, it's on the window, and it seems to do something, but it's like, I don't know what the importance of this circle is. I don't know, like, what, I can, like, guess. I can be like,
like the circle of life,
the circle of
like rebirth, death, rebirth,
and
something
they've got
like
like
that.
the chalk down around the house, and I'm like, okay, like I've seen like witch movies and stuff that they have this circle, but it's like, I just feel like the cult stuff just like undercut so much of what they wanted to do, because I'm like, I don't have any inkling of information about what any of this, like, what anything's for, what it does. I understand you're trying to get your daughter back, but like, I don't really understand what this process is of getting your daughter back. I don't know what's happening to Ollie. Like, I obviously we know at some point, like, the soul is, I don't know, transferring somehow, like, by doing all this stuff, but we don't know, like, the actual process of it. So, they get, like you said, they give us this scary kid look, and I'm just supposed to know what's going on, and it's like, I'm like, is it a demon? Is it, I don't know.
Yeah, that's the thing where I'm not even 100% sure where the VHS is from or whatever she's watching. Like, is it just some underground cult shit that she found, and now she's fascinated with this idea of like soul transference or like soul purging? Or I couldn't even tell. There was certain people in the video that like vaguely looked like her, but also obviously they were speaking a different language. So I have no idea on the specificities of the video. I think this was probably the section of the movie where they were trying to evoke kind of that hell shot from Talk to Me, where it was just kind of chaotic and disgusting and just, kind of makes you feel dirty when you're watching it. But for me, it was more than just kind of confusing because it kind of crops up 3 or 4 different times. I'll mention some aspects of it. I have no clue exactly the specificity of it either. It seems like obviously the circle is kind of keeping something contained or keeping something out. There's a part of the movie where they focus on how the circle is being washed away by the rain or being obstructed, but then it comes back again 10 minutes later that it's still intact, and when the person goes outside, it's very much impacting them at the end of the movie, or at least the spell is being broken. There's obviously aspects of consumption where it seems like when you consume someone, you're kind of ingesting maybe their properties or their soul and transferring it from one to the other. But then that brings up questions of, okay, well then why did the mom feed Ollie their late father's hair? Because it's just like, why would she ever want to like bring that person back? She would have no interest in doing that, so I have no idea. It feels like a lot of it has like concepts of a ritual or concepts of this cult thing that's happening, which I thought about and I said some of that could be intentional, that maybe that is part of the point, that Laura was grasping at straws like in her daughter's death to kind of make connections where there were none and was just kind of, consumed by this idea of bringing her back. But kind of hand-waving that, it still doesn't feel satisfying to me. And obviously, there's aspects of to the death, it seems like, as you get kind of the vessel closer to the person you're trying to bring back, the specificity in how they died, what they're wearing, like what sort of person they are, maybe there's a greater chance of having that soul transfer from one to the other. But once again, the movie kind of never gives us enough information to know, like, other than she's going to die in the rain, that it's like, oh no, like when it starts raining, obviously we know Piper's in danger, but once again, we don't know in danger of what. It's also in this third act where this character of Ollie starts to be so physically transformed by whatever this evil is, or the process, or the body deteriorating, or the consumption of what, he's just eating this corpse, that I have no idea what is going on in this third act, to where like his skull is expanding, his eyes are changing color, his stomach is distended to like almost like a comical degree. And also he kind of exhibits like strength, not super strength, but he's pretty strong for what sort of physical state he should be in as, someone if they were possessed. That for me, this was just where the movie was really losing me. I feel like I would have preferred something just a little bit more subdued, where obviously this is a sick kid who is possessed, but I didn't need like so much of a physical transformation, I don't think.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure why they went in that way. It was kind of taking the scary kid trope to like the ultimate degree, where they were really trying to make this kid scary in the third act, but honestly, I just kind of felt pity, or felt that it looked a little bit too goofy, But looking at this pregnant child essentially walking around,
Yeah, well, and I felt the same, the way they kind of relied on this, because, they use, like, towards in that third act, they have, like, a jump scare with the kid, where the kid just kind of, like, is out of frame and just, like, jumps in the frame. And you'll get, like, I did jump, like, a little bitch. I had to play it off cool, like I was just, like, yawning or something. Can't let this theater know, But it was things like that like afterwards, I'm just like I'm just kind of groaning, because I'm just like, this so isn't that vibe or that kind of movie, that I'm like, to me, I was just like, oh, this is getting steel. Like, if you're relying on like jump scares of this weird looking kid, like,
yeah,
that's not what the rest of this film is like. The rest of this film is like,
not at all.
relishing and like slowly in this like deterioration and this violence. And to me, like, if that's your tone, you kind of gotta like stick to it.
This is the sort of movie where basically in the third act, Ollie should have either died, or we all knew exactly what was happening to them, so we feel so much compassion for them, where like they might look scary, but obviously we know that they're not scary. But the movie, even though I was feeling some of that, obviously, at that point in the movie was still trying to make them out like the monster, gnashing teeth, biting people, trying to overpower them. I think right up until the end, I think Ollie's still trying to kill Piper. So it's the sort of thing where I just felt like the antagonist, or like the evil forces at that point in the movie, were just a bit confused. Like, obviously, at that point in the movie, we should all be hating Laura and Sally Hawkins more than the kid she's been abusing for, 3 weeks or whatever it's been.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I mean, like you said, like, there is some gnarly stuff in this. Like, how did you love the wood eating scene, just chomping down on that wood?
Yeah, I have 3 or 4 different notes of different gore effects in this that just kind of got me. The wood eating scene I thought was gnarly, but not as bad as the knife in the teeth scene.
Oh, yeah.
I hated that. So obviously it was the sort of thing where I figured they might repeat the beat from Talk to Me, where I was like, oh no, the brother's going to get stabbed here suddenly, because you have Ollie kind of eating a chunk of cantaloupe or something off a knife. And the way the camera pulls away, we obviously know something's going to go down with the knife, but then you just hear the sound of the metal grating against the teeth. And we all knew what was happening, but then when it turns the camera and we see just how horrific it is, where kind of a lot of the teeth in the front are ground down, and there's blood spurting out of the mouth, and Andy tries to pry the knife away but just can't get it. It was horrific.
Cuts Ollie's like upper lip right
up.
Yeah,
basically gives him like a cleft palate there. It's tough, like watching that, and then kind of how Andy's trying to do the older brother thing where, oh my God, I really fucked up here, trying to make things right and rush the kid to the hospital. But as soon as he gets him outside of that, vague circle, this area, that clearly things take a turn for even the worse. But it was, I don't know, that scene I thought was one of the stronger scenes in the movie for sure, despite it not featuring Piper.
What a shame that when Ollie wakes up that, poor boy's teeth just, he's gonna be rocking veneers for a long, long time. Yeah, I thought this was so interesting because there's so many of these scenes that were kind of just like brutal, and I thought, like, to me, like, I thought the most reaction I got was like, surprisingly isn't, your teeth being broken as you're eating at a table or, knife to your teeth. To me, it was like when Laura, like, punches Piper while she's sleeping.
That was brutal, too. Which, it's just so sudden in the sound design and kind of the force at which the punch hits. Yeah, that got a reaction out of me as well, where I was like, oof.
Well, and let me give you like some like real talk here about like when I went into this movie, I'd been up all day, and I'm not gonna lie, like I was worried I was gonna fall asleep like at the beginning of it, and I was like, ooh, this is rough, like doing what I can do to stay awake. The minute that punch went down, I was like, what? And I was just like up, and I was like, what is going on? And it was just like, and this is kind of like the disappointing thing about the third act going so off the rails is like, I was so invested, especially once that happens, of like Laura just being this total piece of shit. And I'm like, the things going on to these not half dead kid, like, are to me the most horrifying. Like, I think this is way more brutal. Like, these people don't have like some dead kid spirit inside them or demon or something. Like, these kids are fully alive, and you're just like punch them in the face while they sleep. And like, I just thought like the real life horror in it was so much more brutal and visceral, and like everybody in the theater when that happened was just like, oh my God.
The machinations behind it as well, where Laura basically lathers herself up with the Axe body spray and goes in. So, and obviously we're all set up by this point in the movie, well acquainted with Piper's disability, that, she has the partial blindness. So we knew that even if she woke up in that moment, all she would see is a vague silhouette.
Yeah.
But obviously the smell would linger. This was the sort of thing in the movie where I loved this idea, obviously as like a sicko watching the movie, and it's a horror movie. I love the idea of pitting these two characters in the third act against each other, this brother and sister, because that's just a little bit smarter of a movie, especially if it's through gaslighting or through the deterioration of their bond, like the truthfulness when they say grapefruit, for example, throughout the movie. The aspects like this, where even when you've been saying that you've still been telling lies, I thought was a very effective way to show the slow breakdown of this relationship and ultimately pit these two against each other. But the movie just kills the brother off instead in the third act and kind of fully pivots into Piper versus Laura versus Ollie, and that was just less interesting to me overall. But I agree, the punch to the head was it was devastating as well. There was another scene where I believe it's Ollie peeling the flesh of his arm back very far and eating it. That also got a pretty good reaction, where it was so long and lingered on it, and the effect was so accomplished that it didn't look good. It was very effective.
Yeah, that was very brutal, very brutal. And I will say, like, even though I also had thought, like, man, I really wish they had kept the brother alive for at least way more of the third act, I will say as well as the audience, very, like, the car hitting them, very shocked.
Oh, yeah.
And pretty, I thought that was also, like, pretty brutal, as, I've seen lots
pretty
of movies.
Brutal and artfully done. The half-submerged head in the water is an image that comes up a couple of times throughout the movie, and then also water as, like, this motif throughout both of their movies. We'll get back into that in a minute. It was just something where I didn't really know 100% if he was actually going to be dead there. It's the sort of thing where you hope that this character could have mustered up the strength to maybe hold his breath long enough to survive this, or I was expecting like a slight movement afterwards, like, okay, but he's still alive. And no, it's he's dead. You could tell that it holds him submerged for so long with such force that it's heartbreaking for sure.
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily want the brother to survive the whole movie, but I
No.
almost wish there was a way for that sort of beat to happen in the third act, I guess, where it just kind of feels a little bit more shocking, I guess, for shock's sake, rather than what I think the narrative maybe needed at that point in time. But yeah, I mean, in a vacuum, great sequence for sure.
Yeah, and as for like, you know, the kind of the CPS worker that dies, like, you know, no one should die, but in the same time, like, probably, I don't know, probably not a great CPS worker. She did put these kids with Laura, so definitely not great at her job. This would be a tarnish
sort of
on
thing,
her record.
Yeah, you get the sort of thing where they kind of hand wave that as well, where it's like, oh, she worked with us for 20 years and she was the best counselor any of us could have ever hoped for. But it's also like, yeah, but she also suffered like a huge loss within, I don't know, the past year for sure. The timeline's a little bit fuzzy there and how many transferences were attempted and stuff like that, but it's definitely recent enough that the grief is still lingering large in her life. You would think that there would be some signs there that woman isn't quite right or quite ready to have, you know, a couple of kids in her care.
Yeah, it would make sense to not give her kids, especially a daughter, like a daughter at the same age, essentially.
Yeah, that, you know, bears a lot of resemblance to the daughter she lost. This trauma and grief, you know, we always have to bring it up. It's impossible to get through a modern horror movie without mentioning trauma and grief. I will say, I think Andy's trauma with his father, that PTSD that's kind of lingering throughout the movie, that, you know, the shower or, you know, the rain evoking that sort of sound, I thought it evolved enough throughout the movie that I thought it actually was interesting. Where obviously there's the initial image of his father overdosing in the shower that's haunting him, but then there also evolves to the fact that his father used to run the shower while he'd hit him. You know, that I was like, okay, that's another interesting facet to where this character can't get a shower, and it's kind of like this haunting image that every single time he tries to go in and bathe, essentially it just haunts him. That I thought that was pretty well done for you know, this lingering trauma impacting one of our main characters in a modern horror movie. And similarly, I thought Laura, you know, Sally Hawkins did a great job with showcasing her grief, which is obviously the main point of the movie, is the whole bring her back is due to her losing her child. That one was a little bit more cliched, I'd say, other than the specifics, obviously, of the soul transference aspect. But I thought both of the ways this movie dealt with it was pretty tastefully done, or pretty good. For the most part.
Yeah, no, I thought that was really effective. And I mean, especially just that as like kind of this twist in the plot when they reveal like, oh, actually, like he abused me and all this kind of stuff. Because obviously for the first part, we're like, oh, he's just like traumatized that he saw his dad dead. Like, yeah, that makes sense. And I thought it really added depth, and that's what I you know, we were saying kind of at the beginning, was like these characters of Andy and Piper, like I think are built up like really well, and that's why it's like such a shame that I feel like we kind of, even with Piper, just that third act just kind of like loses Piper too. Like it just gets lost in the sauce, and they're just way more concerned with what kind of weird shit can we show with this Ollie kid?
Mm-hmm. It's just too much going on where they both get lost in the shuffle, which I think is why the third act to me is just a little bit less interesting as a whole. You do get the moment, obviously, of Piper discovering Andy's body and identifying him because of the braces, which I thought was a nice touch. Saying it out loud, it sounds a little silly, but it does work, I think, emotionally in that scene in the movie. But yeah, I like the way trauma and grief are dealt with in this movie, and I like the reveal that Andy is viewed by the system as a troubled kid because there was something on his record when he was 8 years old, and it was actually him kind of lashing out at Piper as being his father's kind of favorite while he was like suffering so much abuse, which, you know, oftentimes this is a thing with these sorts of kids where if they are being abused, they will lash out at their siblings as well. It's kind of this learned behavior that they wind up doing to others. So that was just an interesting little kernel that, once again, it makes the character that you've been following, as you see as wholly sympathetic, obviously be a little bit more complicated, which of course makes the movie as a whole and the relationships in there a lot more interesting. But yeah, I mean, I don't really have any other points to discuss. I'll briefly bring up that there's a water motif in both of these movies. They both, in Talk to Me and Bring Her Back being the two movies, there's drowning, a person who drowns, and it's a prominent kind of haunting for the whole movie. And also the parents die in both the movies, and it's a source of great grief and trauma. And I kind of wonder what the Philippou brothers are saying with it, or if they've experienced something similar in their lives, because it's interesting just how they've put out two features so far, and there is a lot of kind of motifs that are shared between the two of them.
One of these brothers is scared of water. Something's going on here.
Absolutely. So if you're new to the podcast, our review rubric is nay, okay, yay, or slay. So Rowan, what would you give Bring Her Back?
So I said, earlier on that it was going to be tough because I was like, I'm really not going to decide till I kind of get there. When I came out of the theater, it was almost that third act off the rail was almost really disappointing, where I was like, there was so much of it I loved. And then I was like, oh my God, am I going to just okay this? Or did I not even like this? But then,
Yeah,
I had to drive home and stuff, and I think I'm going to end on a yay on it. I think there's enough of it that's so well done. It's really just that third act and kind of, like I said, just some of the cult stuff I wish was expanded a little more. I knew the mechanics of this world, so I could have a better grasp of what's going on. But like you said, I mean, for me, I'm always looking for gnarly shit, and this is, probably, I don't know, this might be the most gnarly I get all year, really. And I kind of thought, other than 28 Days Later, I was like, this might be one of the bigger releases this year, for horror. I was like, in terms of anticipation, and I think overall it delivered. I think, just like we echoed, I think the simple story of it, of Laura, Piper, and Andy, and those three characters keep me interested enough in what's going on. And you just, so much of the stuff that happens is really heartbreaking because they build that up. And, just shout out again to Sally Hawkins. Just, like I said, bravo. If I can just, the whole movie be I fucking hate this character. Fuck this character. I hope they die. That's acting. That's a performance that I'm sure will live on and I'll remember. Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to give it a yay. I think they did a pretty good job. It's not Talk to Me level. It's not, I didn't come out just humming about how pumped I was about this, but I think for a sophomore, I think this is good. And I think unfortunately, I think maybe like you were saying, and I said that maybe they went for a little almost more traditional and where they were trying to go and making something a little more A24-ish and grief stricken. And I kind of hope maybe for a third movie they kind of bring that youthfulness back, like Talk to Me had, and just give us something that's hip and different and exciting, and not something that that as good as Bring Her Back is, I still kind of feel it's kind of stuff I've seen before, in terms of themes and what's going on. So yeah, I'm gonna end off with a yay. What about you, Colton?
Quickly, I will say there's still a couple of things to look forward to this year. We got Weapons coming out, which I haven't seen anything about, but everyone's freaking out over that. And then just for you, Him, that football horror movie that's produced by Jordan Peele. So we have a couple of bigger releases, I think, still to look forward to.
You got Megan 2 circled on your calendar, I believe, don't you? You're pretty excited for that.
I know it's coming out. It's not circled on my calendar. but yeah, with Bring Her Back, I'm in a similar vein to yourself. I'd give this a yay. It's the sort of thing where this one to me almost feels more like the feature directorial debut. Yeah. This is a much more safe movie where if we would have watched it and this was the first movie they made, we would have basically been like, oh yeah, it's very competent. It knows what it's doing. It's, it's far more confident than a debut should be. And, they took their time. It's, somber. It's deliberately paced. It's weird to follow this up from Talk to Me, which once again was just so exciting, energetic, and kind of inspirational to me of these two YouTubers went out and made that sort of movie. But yeah, we're not talking about Talk to Me. Bring Her Back. I loved the core brother-sister relationship. I thought the gore effects were gnarly, made me wince. And if you're a sicko, you're going to love them. And it was the sort of thing, obviously, Sally Hawkins was great doing something else. Some of the stylistic choices in the shallow depth of field and whatnot I liked. But for me, the third act goes too far off the rails, falls apart a little bit. The scary kid trope is something that's definitely overused, and it's used to quite an extreme in this movie. Yeah. And then, obviously, I was so confused with some of the specifics of this soul transference and the soul purging and exactly what was going on there that I was left a little bit befuddled, but like not in a good way. I don't think in an intentional way. I think the directors thought most people would understand everything that was going on here and it would be dramatic. And instead, everyone I went to the theater with was just kind of like, what exactly happened here? And we were talking, going back and forth, and it's not in a interested way, but in a confused way. So that's, for those reasons, I'd give it a yay. It's definitely not what I would call a sophomore slump, because it's not bad enough, in my opinion, to be a slump. But yes, of course, it's lesser than Talk to Me. That was an amazing release a couple of years ago, in my opinion. And if you're not following us already on our socials, you can do so at It Slays Podcast. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Slasher, Letterboxd, Threads, Bluesky. If you're on the social media, have a look around at It Slays Podcast and give us a follow if you're not already. And if you want to help support the show financially, like our horror hounds Holly, Nicholas, Mark, Steven, Dan, Brian, Trevor, and James, gain access to the Patreon exclusive show Stream Screams and get episodes of the main show 48 hours early, be sure to head on over to patreon.com/itslayspodcast and choose whatever tier works best for you. Rowan, we didn't discuss the music at all in this movie. In Talk to Me, once again, some great needle drops of music I'm not at all familiar with. Yeah. I was way too old for this. This movie has a few different needle drops. I don't know if anything was like predominant enough for me to make a playlist, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, and I honestly, I didn't bring it up, but I thought the score was like a little lacking. I was like, I would have liked something maybe that was memorable, but I don't really remember. And I agree. I think the needle drops, it was like stuff I was like, oh yeah, but it wasn't anything that I think will make the playlist. But you can find out what does make the playlist by going to Spotify and going to the It Slays Podcast Horrific playlist. If you have any problems finding it, you can go to any of the social media that Colton just mentioned, go into the bio, click the Linktree link. It'll take you directly there. We upload scores or licensed music from iconic horror movies we review, or just horror movies we love. So give it a follow. We update it regularly and get your spooky music on, because why the hell not?
And next time on the show, we're likely going to be covering The Ritual, I would say, with Al Pacino, Dan Stevens.
Dangerous Animals is next week.
Well, so they're both coming out next week, from what I Googled. I could be wrong, but when I just quickly Googled, they were both coming out next week. And I feel like The Ritual will be a larger release. Like, it'll hit more theaters. I would love to do Dangerous Animals. Spoilers. I'm a huge fan of Sean Byrne and his other two movies he did, The Devil's Candy and The Loved Ones. I don't think we've covered either on the podcast, but this guy hasn't done a movie.
I also love The Loved Ones. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think this guy has done a movie in a decade, and he's also one of those that came out, dropped two great horror movies, and then just... I don't think he's given an interview. I basically don't think he's been in the industry, and just this movie came out of nowhere. I saw a trailer for it like a month ago, checking something out, and I just couldn't believe he was back. So I really hope that's playing near me, and if it is, we'll 100% be covering 100%. Dangerous Animals. I'm just thinking it might take a while to get here. Or
I'm kind of worried about The Ritual. I've been looking around. I don't know if The Ritual's coming.
Oh, really? Okay. Well. I mean, if it's Dangerous Animals, I'd much prefer it. Let's fingers crossed. I don't really care which one it is. We'll cover something, but it's just those two were coming out recently or next that we'd likely cover on the show. And with that, I think that about wraps things up for this episode. So until next time, I'm Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And as long as you keep listening, we'll keep slaying.